welcome to the third installment of Talk About Teens. This actually came about when Elisabeth, who is out in California, she and I are in a networking organization, actually a couple of networking organizations in common. And she reached out to me. She said, hey, there's a cool upcoming conference on children's mental health. Would you be interested in attending it virtually? Because of course it was during COVID. And then maybe we can kind of put on our own series. And we started brainstorming and we said, yeah, we'd like to do that. And we started thinking about other people that we might want to include. And Elisabeth has known Deborah and said, Deborah's fantastic, has a ton of insight. We're all veteran educators in our own spaces. And so that's how this event came to be. This is actually our third of four. And today we're going to be giving you support on supporting your kiddos as we go back to school, not only back to school in general, which can be stress inducing and anxiety producing, but especially if we're looking at going back to school for the first time in a year and a half. I know we've each got some feedback on that, but if you're also interested, our next event is going to support you in kind of going, all right, we're one quarter into the new school year. What do we do now? How do we make sure that our kids are on track? And so that's going to be on October 23rd, same times as today's event, depending on your time zone. And to register for that, if you haven't already, I did see that we had some folks go ahead and register for today's event and the October event. But if you haven't yet, you can just go right back to the same link at parenttweenconnection.com and click on the events or click on Talk About Teens. It'll get you there. So without further ado, our first presenter today is, I am convinced that she is a goddess among mortals because she has a vast experience in working with middle school children. And my estimation is that it seems like middle school is when the aliens take over the kids' bodies and you just kind of wonder what happened to my cute, adorable, cooperative, kind child. And Elisabeth taught them for decades. So she says, when you want to raise happy, healthy, and productive kids who are prepared for whatever life throws at them, Elisabeth is your go-to parenting coach and expert. She says, kids don't come with an operating manual. So if you think you're supposed to know how to parent or that it's just like magically built into your DNA, alas, that is not true. With more than 50,000 hours of working with kids and parents to support her in her work and to support them, Elisabeth can guide them through any situation. And I can tell you, she has some, what seems like absolute miracle cures. She says, parenting is tough enough under normal circumstances, and it is a skill. It can be taught. And if it can be taught, that means it can be learned and it can be practiced. She's the author of Parenting as a Second Language, and she was a longtime teacher with the Redwood City School District in Northern California. Elisabeth brings more than 25 years of working with kids of all ages to working with parents now. And through her talks, workshops, and webinars, Elisabeth shines her warmth and wisdom with parents around the world. So without further ado, I'm going to toss it on over to Elisabeth.
Well, thank you so very, very much for that warm welcome, Clarissa. I appreciate it. And I'm super excited about our Rocking Back to School, and I'm going to be covering Rocking Back to Middle School. And when Deborah and Clarissa and I sat down to talk about this, there were more topics I could have, the four topics assigned to me, I could have covered in 2 hours. Given the time that I have, I'm going to, I'm not going to deliver everything promised, but what I'm going to deliver well so that you have something down. And the thing that I really wanted to cover was, what is it that teachers expect you to cover at home? What is it that we sit around in the teacher room and we say, this kid can't do this, I wish these parents would do that. And we don't really mean that from a judgmental or negative point of view. We're parents ourselves mostly, and we get how hard it is. And at the same time, our job is to teach. Our job is not to parent. And while there's a lot of nurturing involved in teaching, the core skills, what sort of brings up a child's maturity level, that really comes from home. So what is the first thing we expect? We expect that our kids are going to come to school with their basic needs met. That means they are arriving to school on time, that they have been fed, that they are dress code dressed. And we understand that a child may be dress code dressed when she walks out the door or he walks out the door and may arrive at school looking different. We get that. And at the same time, we at least expect you to be fighting the good fight at home about this is the school standard. This is what we want to see our kids do. Finally, we expect your child to be awake. And I realize again that not every child is awake in the morning. And I taught at a school where one year we decided we'd do A weeks and B weeks. And in the A weeks, we taught periods 1 through 7. And in the B weeks, we turned that around and we taught 7 through 1. And it was astounding the difference in a student you had. I had one student, first period and seventh period. I had him first period for English and seventh period for German. And when he came to German class, he got given a German name. So, in the morning he was Nick, and in the afternoons he was Wolf. And it was hysterical because Nick was like just completely unresponsive. And Wolf was this bouncy, great little kid. And then we'd get into a B week and Wolf would be like comatose. And all of a sudden I got to see who Nick was as an English student. So when I say we want basic needs met, I do recognize we are dealing with a middle schooler, and that means that there might be a lot of variation and a lot of pushback. But we expect you to do your good college try on getting that kid there on time, fed, dressed appropriately, and having had enough sleep the night before. That being said, we totally get when the kid has made you late and you have left the kid at home, and now the kid is 2 hours late to school because he had to walk to school because he didn't get ready in time to be in the car so that you could drop him at school so you would get to your meeting. And we are happy to work with you on, what can you set up at home in order to try to make sure that he gets there on time. But it's still your job to get him there on time, fed, dressed, and awake. Okay, the other thing that we are happy to help build on, but we expect you to teach at home, is basic respect and consideration. Please, thank you, right? This is the oil that greases the wheel in life. And when you are enforcing that at home all the time, then kids bring that to school. And we're dealing with, 100 to 150 kids during the day. And it makes an enormous difference. Excuse me, Mrs. Stitt, may I please? Thank you, Mrs. Stitt. These are the things that help my day feel better. And when my day feels better, I am more present and ready to teach your child. And I'm ready to share everything that's great that I have to share with them. And again, I teach middle school, so I understand if your child is snarling at me. And at the same time, you can tell the kids who have that basic practice at home of that courtesy of please, thank you, excuse me. Yes, they have their snarly days, and we can forgive them their snarly days. But basically, they are well-mannered kids. For example, they don't interrupt. And yes, I have children who are just irrepressible talkers, and they have to process everything by talking, and they have to talk, and they're excited. And I love that. And I understand that they are in process, and it might take them a few more years to learn how to sit in a meeting and not be irrepressible. but they need to at least have this awareness that it is rude to interrupt and that we need to listen to others. So, if I have kids who are like that, who have going, I'm sorry, or like, oh, okay, I know they're working on it. And I know that it's something that their parents are working with them at home. It's not that they just feel that it's completely okay for me to be talking all the time whenever there's a thought in my head and it's coming out of my mouth. Cleaning up. How many of you have had that sign in the workplace that says, please clean up, your mother doesn't live here? Well, unless you are coming down and cleaning the classroom, I don't know a school in the nation that has adequate custodial time and money spent. My classroom is constantly just disgustingly dirty, like just dusty and awful. And if you want to come down with your dust mop and you want to spray and wax and wipe in my classroom, that's great. Your child can be as sloppy as he or she wants to be. Until that day, however, I would like you to teach your child to clean up after him or herself. You get something out, you put it away. You drop something on the floor, you pick it up. And this seems like no-brainer stuff. And it's like, and I know that for the parents who are here, I am probably preaching to the choir. But I do want you to be aware of the conversations that you can be having with your kids about how school is not home. And your teachers have expectations of how you're going to show up and how you are going to behave. And of course, taking care of resources is a big one. If you wouldn't write on your dining room table, don't write on my desks at school. If you wouldn't put your chewing gum underneath your dining room table, don't you dare put your chewing gum under your desk at school, right? If you want to do have a spit wad contest, great. Let's go have a spit wad contest at recess outside. Don't do spit wads on my ceiling. It's absolutely gross and disgusting, right? These are conversations worth having with your kids, that your teacher is there to teach. And she does not, she does not need to deal with all this stuff. Okay. The first two to me are just sort of like basic parenting. But this is one where often we don't teach our children to advocate for themselves, sort of for two reasons. One is because we fail to make the shift ourselves from elementary school to middle school. And we've been helping our little kids, and we've been supporting our little kids, and we've been going in and talking to our little kids' teachers. And it's really hard for us to know and to realize, like, okay, in order for my child to learn how to step forward and advocate for himself, I have to step way back. And how can you do that and not be fearful about it? Well, for one, you can talk to your child, have conversations about, the first thing when your kid comes in and they throw the backpack on the floor and they go, "Ugh, Mrs. Stitt is a witch. I hate her." After everyone's taken a deep breath and maybe said kid has had a snack and you've calmed down at the table and you have totally listened to them and heard what went on today, eventually, I would like you to please ask them to consider the teacher's point of view, right? Well, maybe Mrs. Stitt shouldn't have done that. What might have been going on for her that's the way she responded? And in talking to your child, you may come to either the conclusion that, yeah, Mrs. Stitt is having a bad day and she's human and she has 150 kids to deal with and you are one child. Or a child may come to the conclusion that, well, maybe I overreacted, maybe I didn't study enough, maybe I wasn't paying attention when she said that was going to be on the test. Either way, it's a mature person who can put themselves in somebody else's shoe and go like, okay, how was is my reaction taking into account the fact that I'm dealing with another human being? All right, you're going to teach your child to advocate for themselves. After this conversation, it's clear, yeah, the child has a leg to stand on, and this is something the child needs to talk to the teacher about. Help the child anticipate the teacher's reaction. And teachers get reputations, and you'll know different teachers. And I used to do this for my students all the time. They would come in and they would plop down by my desk at recess, or fall on my desk at recess and go, oh, Miss Wood hates me. And we would talk through the fact that Miss Wood does not hate you. Yes, Miss Wood has very high standards, and she can be intimidating. And, then I would be able to kind of reassure them, chances are this is how she's going to react. And are an adult, you can imagine the teacher situation. You have a much better chance of helping your child to anticipate how a teacher is going to react when approached politely and with the right words, right? And even if our child is in the right, there's still this power imbalance, which says that for most teachers, the child is still going to have to come with some level of humility, some level that says, I'm not sure about this, Mrs. Stitt. I could be wrong. And at the same time, I think you put this on the exam. And as I looked through my notes and I talked to some other people and had them look through their notes, and we don't see anywhere where you said that you were going to look at this on the exam. And this is something that I remember you talked about it in class, but you really only talked about it for like 5 minutes. And could we talk about that? Right? If a child came to me that way, I would be so ready and willing to go, oh, really? And sometimes teachers, I'm like, no, I know I talked about that. And sometimes, especially if a teacher teaches the same class multiple periods in a row, she knows she said it out loud. And she may not realize that she said it out loud first period, and she said it out loud second period, and maybe even third period, but by fourth period, maybe she forgot to say something out loud. And then maybe she does need to make an adjustment. And thank you, kid, for letting me do it. And the great thing when a kid does that and they do it politely and constructively is that now I get to go and make amends with my whole class, right? I get to come back to my fourth period class and say, you know what, kiddos? Johnny very nicely brought to my attention that I didn't actually prepare you guys for that. And even though it's on the test because everybody else got it, I'm going to readjust the point systems. I'm going to take that out of your points. Okay, practicing and role-playing this conversation. Kids are not going to be able to use effective communication right off the bat. They probably need to write it out. They probably need to role-play it with you, and you can do it both ways. You can be the teacher and have them be the kid, but you can also role play and model that language as the kid and have them react as the teacher. That can be useful because when they're the teacher and they're hearing how reasonable your language is, even if you tell them, okay, be the most difficult teacher you can be Mrs. Stitt at her worst, then you can, and I'm laughing my head now because Mrs. Stitt at her worst speaks German. Communication breaks down altogether. But imagine it. Then they get how does it feel to stand in both shoes? And then finally, and this is most critically important, at the middle school age, you cannot go behind your child's back. If you feel the time has come for you to step in and to talk to that teacher, you have to let your kid know. Lay it out, look, we've tried this. You tried to talk to the teacher. This still isn't happening. This needs to be corrected. It's time for me as the adult to step in and to support you. I am going to be writing an email to Mrs. Stitt. And especially if you're going to go to the principal, because you don't want Mrs. Stitt, again, she shouldn't do this, and hopefully she won't, but teachers are human. And you don't want her coming and getting mad at the kid because, your mother sent me quite a harsh email this morning. If the kid doesn't know, that's going to be a shock. So don't go behind your kid's back. Okay. Clarissa, are you keeping an eye on the time? Because my phone just fell down on the floor.
About another 10 minutes or so.
Okay. All right. So, in general, it is a parent's job to teach social emotional skills. We used to do much better at this, partly because we used to spend a lot more face-to-face time with our kids. Now, because mom and dad are both working, our kids are spending more time in childcare. And there are a lot of great things and great skills that your kids are picking up at childcare. And at the same time, they're not getting as much one adult child attention, which means you're not doing those little in the moment course corrections that used to maybe happen when a child was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, kind of coming in. So we used to be more present, both emotionally, because we weren't on our screen so much and we weren't trying to pretend to work. We weren't parenting in the middle of COVID. We weren't pretending to do a job and to also monitor our kids at the same time. So we were more responsive to our kids, and we were modeling and correcting along the way. One of the things that neuroscience has helped us to understand about emotional regulation, which is pretty cool, research in the last 10, 20 years, is that when we are calm and we can bring things down, we can help our child calm down. And calming down is a skill. And we can teach our child how to calm down. And if you have a 7th or 8th grader, 6th, 7th, 8th grader who is still, yes, okay, and let's put brackets around this, because one of the workshops I teach is, where did my sweet baby go? And I teach that workshop because we'll have a kid who was doing great. You were looking at your 10-year-old and 5th grader going like, I've got the best kid. She's responsible. She turns her work in. She's sweet. We have this great relationship. We have fun together. And then 2 years later, you have this moody, snarling beast, and you're thinking, where did my sweet baby go? So yes, we have to expect the emotional roller coaster. And at the same time, kids who have skills in the area of emotional regulation are able to bring themselves down faster from, a flare of rage or upset, and are able to lift themselves up more easily out of a funk because they have the skills. And the skills are the same skills that we use, right? We take a deep breath. We count to 10. We walk away for a moment and we come back. We make sure that we've had enough sleep and that we've been eating regularly, right? This is all things that we can really set our kids up for success in school through our parenting. Consideration for others, that came up a little bit in, consideration for your teacher, consideration for the resources. But again, kids whose parents have modeled, and if you have multiple kids at home, we know siblings fight with each other. We know siblings go at each other. But there's so much that we can do as parents to help each child feel heard and understood, and to give them the language, help model and teach and practice the language so that they can express their emotions and their feelings, and help them move towards finding win-win solutions with each other. I can tell in a heartbeat which kids have that skill at home, because they are the kids who come into my classroom and who, when there's a conflict or a problem, are able, they have the language to talk the other kid down, to work with the other child and find another solution. All right. In general, caring, compassion, tolerance, patience. Kids who come to class with these skills come ready to focus on their academics and ready to learn and to move forward. When teachers have a whole classroom of those kids, the amount of academic progress that we can make is phenomenal. Like there's no stopping those kids because they are emotionally regulated. They have the social emotional skills to do teamwork, to borrow a pencil, to lend a pencil, to ask for help when they need it, to apologize if they said something which was, a little snarky or mean. And all of that means that we can get to learning and the academics. Okay. Alongside our social emotional skills are executive functioning skills. And of course, academics demand very high levels of executive functioning. It's not the only place to learn executive functioning skills, however, right? When we ask our child to be organized with their own things at home, like I come through the door, there's a place where my jacket goes, where my backpack goes. I know what to do with my lunchbox and how to process it. I have a folder for my homework. I'm coming out. And probably it means that you have a system or an organization in your home for where do I find, where is there more toilet paper? Or where, you don't have just a junk drawer of kitchen utensils. There's some order. Like kids can know, like, oh, like this is how you can tell if you're organized. If a child says, where's the this? You don't have to walk over and show them. You can describe to them where it is. Those skills translate. When you have those skills in your home, you can do it. They can do it with their academics. They can organize their notes. They can organize their assignments. And they can do it. All right, task initiation. This is so enormous. And if you've had the child who's waited until the last moment to start homework or to do something, you know how important this is. How can we train this at home? Well, one of my favorite ways is rather than telling our kids and nagging them of what to do, when we walk into a situation, we say, what needs to happen here? Right? Like the kitchen is a complete disaster. They made cookies and now the kitchen is a complete disaster. And rather than coming in and nagging and getting on their cases, I walk into the kitchen and I say, what needs to happen here? And I wait. Because when I don't jump in to start nagging or to problem solving, most kids are smart enough to look around and go like, don't worry, Mom, we are going to clean up. In which case I might say, that's great. I need to cook dinner. So by when do you need to have it happen? This might also happen by, again, when we train our kids to, if you see something like, we are a family, we work together. I did the shopping, the groceries came in, and then I had to take a call. When you walk through the kitchen and the groceries are sitting on the counter, what needs to happen? And again, this is part of our awareness that our kids at 11, 12, 13, they are intellectually and physically capable of doing any household chore we give them. Now, some we might need to still supervise, right? When they're cleaning out the gutters, we might still supervise. But basically, they are capable of doing it. So we want to train them to look around and to do what needs doing without being told. And this business is taking initiative. When I ask adults, if you had an intern, what would be the number one skill that you would want them to have? And what I hear, I live in Silicon Valley, and what I hear from people working in big companies in Silicon Valley who often have interns is like, these kids are amazingly skilled and amazingly smart when you tell them exactly and precisely what to do. but they have almost no ability to look around and see that something needs to be done and to say like, oh, well, while you were on your call, I saw that needed to be done, and so I did it. Even if they do something wrong, bosses would rather see them take initiative and get started with something. So that one is enormous. Put a star by that one. All right, impulse control is really part of the emotional regulation, but again, it says I'm going to think before I act. Mental flexibility is a skill we need for learning, because we need to be able to problem solve. We need to be able to look at things from a different direction, right? If I've got a difficult math problem and I go down this path and I keep hitting the same stopping point, I need to have the mental flexibility to step around and go, what's a different way that I could approach this problem? Well, that's a great question for when your child's like, Mom, I can't do this, but this is that. Come rescue me. Sweetheart, what's a different way you could solve that problem? Oh, well, I guess I could do this. Great. Go try that. Right? So giving them the space rather than stepping in and taking over or saying, look, this is the way to do it. One of the ways that we help increase their mental flexibility is to go around like, Mom, the sink is overflowing. Well, what could be a solution to that? How could you do that? What needs to happen now? Right? This is part of the problem solving too. The more we put on them to step up, the more we train their brains to take responsibility for their own academics. That's going to help them at school. And it's going to help them in life. And really, there's no academic skill, maybe with the exception of the math thread, that you have to learn in middle school. Everything basically gets repeated in high school, right? Yes. Deborah Ann was a science teacher, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Yes, I'm going to learn how to, write my hypothesis and to lay out my lab report in 7th or 8th grade. But my 9th grade biology teacher is going to teach it to me again. So really, in 7th and 8th grade, it's these things. It's task initiation. It's organization. It's impulse control. Impulse control, by the way, includes reading through the directions to the bottom before you get started, right? Problem solving, mental flexibility. We can teach these skills at home. So if we never actually helped our kids with their homework, but we had this list of skills and the social emotional skills as our curriculum at home, we would be doing our kids an enormous service in preparing them to show up and milk everything they can from their teachers at school. Okay, really quickly. I'm just going to walk through this and say these things. How to talk so your child's teacher will listen, and so that your child's teacher will talk. And in middle school, this really means how to talk so that your child's teacher will listen to your child and talk to your child in a constructive way. All right, first of all, please remind your kids, we're all on the same page here, sweetheart. Mrs. Stitt and I, we all want what is best for you, right? We may have different views about how to go about it, but we want the same way. Teachers are people too. Yeah, we are not automatons. We do not come to class and perform and come across the same way every day. I would suggest that probably teachers have a great deal more patience than your average population, but we have up days and down days. And hopefully as teachers, we're giving our kids grace, and we want our kids to give us grace as well. All right, data is your friend. When you do actually come to a teacher, it's really useful to have data. So like one of the things that I don't think teachers do a very good job at is they don't do a very good job in calculating how long homework is going to take kids. And so you can provide data for that by having your kid. Now at my school, 7th graders were supposed to work 25 minutes per academic subject. And so I would tell at back to school night, I would say, have your kid put a timer on and have them put a line across at 25 minutes when the timer goes off, put a line across wherever they are in their work. And if you want to sign that and have the kid turn that in, I will give them full credit for whatever they got right, because I need calibration. I need to know how long it's taking stuff. And it helps me to see, not only does it help me to see where I haven't taught a concept well enough, or where I've expected too much or too little, right? If not a single paper comes back with a line, then I know that, like, oh, this was super easy. You guys got off easy last night. I could up the ante a little here. But when I get a lot of lines back, I can go like, okay, this was too much. I gave you too big of a chunk, and then I can recalibrate. So when you can come to a teacher and say, or the other way you could do this is to just record, how long did it take to do English every night? How long did it take to do math every night? And then it also is great because then you can have a conversation with your kid about, math just takes you longer. And that does mean that I know the rule is to stop after 25 minutes for math, but you took 15 minutes on English and 15 minutes on social studies. So you have some time to give to math, and that's your weak point. So we're going to give it. And then finally, practice effective communication. We want to model it for our kids. We want to be polite. We want to be constructive. We want to be clear. We want to be mature adults. And I'm sorry when you run into that teacher who does not give you that same maturity and respect in return. Still, I want you to model it for your kids. Okay, finally, if the relationship breaks down, before you go to the principal, give the teacher the respect. This is just like not going behind your kid's back. Don't go behind the teacher's back. Let the teacher know. Right? We've been doing this back and forth, and let the teacher know. It appears that we are having a hard time reaching a solution on our own for this. Is it time to reach out to the principal for support? And if the teacher says no, and you say, all right, well, what can we do to change this? And you still can't change something, then just let the parent know, the teacher know. Mrs. Stitt, I'm writing to you today to let you know that I'm going to be having a meeting with Mrs. Davis about the situation we've been working on, respectfully. Okay, because that keeps you in the right, and that keeps you in a constructive place. Okay, I must be out of time. Am I, Clarissa? Okay.
Yes, my friend.
Yep, I'm going to read it. Train your child to communicate. Don't email your teacher behind your back. This is an excellent, fantastic time for your child to fail. And I could have talked 20 minutes about the benefits of letting your kid fail. So just take my word for it. And then if the child misbehaves, then help them make amends. Help teach them how to repair the relationship. All right, thank you very much. And this, right. I love this. Okay, major failure here. This blog is not yet posted, but I promise I will post this blog by the end of the day. And if you want to read my views on how to motivate your student, which is another issue which comes up a lot in middle school, it will be there for you.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead. We're going to take about a 5-minute restroom break, caffeination break, hydration break, whatever we need break. And then we're going to come back.
Does anybody have any questions though?
Oh, good point.
Anybody have any questions for Elisabeth?
I think I had a couple. One was like, I mean, I know these things, and I'm pretty much coming to this course with this in mind for my son's school. I'm on the PTSA, and I'm supposed to put together a session to welcome the new parents, and I needed ideas to help them. But it's like, I see this every year. This is my second time going through with the middle school, because I have an older son and I have a younger son. And I feel like parents don't know that they're supposed to do these things. So how do you get through to the parent? Like, how do you explain this to them without them getting upset?
Well, I mean, Cindy, the first thought that pops into my mind is, if you want me to come talk to your PTA, I would be more than happy to, and I promise I can do it faster. You guys, I really apologize. Normally I have my timer right up and it fell. So then I went on and on and on. But I would be, if you want me to consolidate this to like 10 minutes or 20 minutes at a PTA meeting, I would be happy to do it. If you would like to use my slides, Cindy, and go through it yourself, you're more than welcome. I'm happy to send you my slides. Just email me. I mean, it seems like no-brainer information.
It does, but I feel like parents come in and go, I feel like they're like overprotecting their child. They're saying, there's nothing wrong with my kid. My kid is the best. And, how can you possibly say that my child did all this wrong? This is not my child. My child is an angel. And it's like, we're trying to like reconstruct things because, you see it. Bullies happen, and the push and the shove in the classroom. And we're just trying to make a peaceful, because I'm like, here we are, we're talking about going back to school after a year of being off. And we're like, we anticipate this major explosion of emotions. And I'm just, even my son, he knows that there are certain kids that he has trouble with. He knows he has certain teachers he has trouble with. And it's like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to manage this? And we don't know what the others are going to do. And we've talked about it, but it's like, that's us. But then now I'm also, I am definitely trying to reach out to other parents and say, hey, we need to have these hard conversations. How, and they're going to ask me, they're going to say, how do we start these conversations? How do we do this without the kid pushing back saying, there's nothing wrong with me?
If I may, I'm actually going to cover that specifically
Okay.
in the next thing. But the other thing is, when you want to present this stuff to the parents, don't present it, go at it the way Elisabeth goes at it. Don't present it as, we've got this problem that's coming up. Present it as, I have found some stuff that's going to make this beginning of the year easier. And then nobody feels like, well, this is being directed at me and my child. Everybody's on board with, nobody knows what's going to happen this year, so easier is great.
And I think ultimately the end idea of that all three of us certainly come to this with is, like I said in Elisabeth's intro, is that people, like, we don't have the answers. And yet socially, and I know this is part of what drives all of us in the work that we do with families and with teenagers and tweens, is, there's all this support for parents of littles. Whether it's MOPS groups or, stroller strides or, conversations around postpartum depression are becoming significantly more socially acceptable. Like, the stigma around all of that is reducing. And yet somehow we still have this social expectation that by the time your kids are 10, parents have it like all figured out. And parents don't realize that they hold this expectation of others and also of themselves. And so being like, dude, you don't know everything. Like, it's okay to not know everything, because it's not socially acceptable to not know everything. And to just come at it, and as Elisabeth said, and as I have said, and to be clear, I don't actually have children of my own, but I've worked again in the education realm, and I'm the daughter of a not so fantastic mother-daughter relationship. So I kind of come at it from the teen perspective of like, okay, well, how do we empower the teens more so? It's okay to not know. there is no like, you have to pass like driver's ed. There is no like parenting ed, And so coming at it from the perspective of like, we don't all know this. I got good information. I learned something from this. I think you'll learn something too. And if we can help our kids, there's no harm in that. There's no shame in that. So just really maintaining that non-judgment. So
Also, if you guys can find the links to the previous sessions, there's a lot of information about what if your child is different than their teacher, and if there is conflicts there. So the other 2 episodes that we did with this have a lot of information in them that are covering some of your questions.
I'll find them and I'll make sure that we also send them out in the follow-up email with when this goes up. You'll also be able to find it right on the same YouTube channel. So we'll make sure to do that. All right, let's do this so that we can honor time. Let's take a quick break. I have 9:50 Mountain Time, 11:50 Eastern. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and Deborah will be on talking about supporting folks in the transition to early high school. And I would say, even if your kids are younger, stay tuned, because a lot of this overlaps.
Yes.
And I believe it's always a good idea to look at what's coming down the road, because if it's developmentally appropriate for your kiddo, like we recognize not every kid develops at the same time. Some of the things that Deborah may have to offer or that I may have to offer can completely be applicable to younger kiddos. And a lot of what Elisabeth, for example, had to offer is going to apply to some of our college-bound kids. So stay tuned. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right, here's your 1-minute warning. Let folks come back. All right, Elisabeth, are you there?
Unmute. There we go.
Awesome. Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. And it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce to you Deborah Ann Davis. Deborah Ann Davis is an award-winning author, speaker, and coach with over 3 decades of experience in middle school and high school education. As a teacher, Deborah has helped countless families replace the pain that is typical of these tween-teen years by fostering positive and healthy relationships, despite all of their adolescent angst. She's the founder of the Awesome Mom Tribe, and she's a mother herself. She now applies her experiences in education to coaching parenting skills. She's armed with an amazing sense of humor. She has a BS in education from the University of Massachusetts and a master's in education in supervision from Emory University. She provides guidance and encouragement for moms to help them foster positive, healthy relationships within their families. And in fact, she has a book called How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Doors. And even if it's a son that you have, I highly recommend this book. It is part story, part manual, 100% wit and wisdom. And each chapter is full of little useful sidebars and concrete information, exercises to help you increase your skill and your relationship with your teen. Deborah's previous titles include How to Get Your Happy On and, go figure, The Love of Fairs series. Please welcome our expert, Deborah Ann Davis.
Thank you. That was lovely. Okay, give me 1 second to share my screen so I can have my up. And everybody, if you could just nod to say that you can see that. Okay, good. So I'm going to click on this to make this work. And it's working. Okay. So Elisabeth just did a wonderful job talking about being a parent of a middle schooler and how you can tackle the back to school situation that everybody's going to be facing. And of course, it may be changing. And I'm going to talk about underclassmen. And where I live, underclassmen are 9th and 10th graders. Although when I was teaching in Atlanta, underclassmen were 8th through 10th graders. So I am the author of How to Get Your Happy On and How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. If you want more information, my email's at the bottom and my website's at the bottom of the screen. So today we're going to talk about getting back to school for people. It's like the freshmen who are doing the transition to high school and sophomores who are starting their second year in high school. We're going to talk about perspective, the conversations that need to be held, and we're going to look back on last year and take a look at what's coming for next year. And then we're going to talk about how to organize your family. And I am going to talk really fast because I am trying to cram a lot into a short period of time. So in one of the other episodes that we did of this, I went through what I'm about to discuss in a lot of detail, but I'm just going to run through it real quickly to give you an orientation. The book, The Inner Game of Tennis, is basically a philosophy book. So if you could picture a tennis match, you have player A, player B, and you have the ref. So player A hits the ball and it flies out of bounds. And player A looks at it and goes, "It's out. Oh, you idiot. How can you be such an idiot? That was such an easy shot." And they throw the racket down and they leave the court, vowing to never play tennis again. Meanwhile, player B is on the other side going, "It's out. I rock. I'm so good. I'm a great tennis player," even though all they did was watch it sail over their head. The ref on the side sees what happens, watches the player A hit the ball and says, "It's out." just being analytical and observational and viewing it from the outside. So why am I talking about this? Because in every conflict that you have with your kids, or the kids with their teachers, or you with the teachers, you can either be the player A, the player B, or you can be the ref. I'm recommending that you try to be the ref, especially in emotional situations. So when something goes wrong, if you can say, well, what happened? Or do it through Elisabeth's approach, like what should be happening next here? And you just look at what's going on without passing judgment, without being critical, and say, how could we have done this a better way going forward? Then you'll be modeling an excellent perspective for your child, and you will be able to handle things that are wrought with emotion already and be able to deal with them in a more calm, more genuine way. So that brings me to report cards, because what tool comes from the school that creates more emotion than report cards? People misuse report cards. People don't see them as a snapshot of your child's progress. Instead, they think a good report card means I have a good kid and I'm a good parent, and a bad report card means I'm a bad parent and my child's not good, and all these negative things. But in reality, report cards are tools. They just tell you where they are at that moment. I mean, this is the perspective I want you to adjust, because think about your kids when at some point they're going to get overwhelmed with academics. I don't care if they're a strong student or if they're a struggling student. At some point, they're going to have some difficulty. And this is where you want to use the word yet. You say to your child, it's okay. You haven't mastered it yet. That's all right. We will work on this. I got your back. We're going to figure this out going forward. I mean, nobody says to the toddler, you get a C- because you have to hold on to the couch when you're walking around the living room. Nobody says to the little kid, you get a D+ because you're still using training wheels on your bike. And why is that? It's because we are understanding that these are a process. This is a continuum that they're on, and we are confident that they are going to master this. So we know they haven't mastered it yet, but it is coming. And we need to be that way in terms of academics. So how is education different? Education has these arbitrary deadlines, the quarterly ending with the report card, the June ending of the school year. So we're saying you have to master it within this amount of time. So they didn't master it during that amount of time. That doesn't mean they're not going to master it, especially after the screwy year we just all had. They may not have mastered everything that was expected this year. So you've got a couple of weeks before school starts, so you can help them with that. And I'm not saying march into the room and saying, okay, summer's over, we need to start getting you ready for school. I've got ways for you to approach it. That's what today's discussion's about. So this is about holding the difficult conversations. What you want to do is decide about what your topic is going to be, and then you set the stage for the conversation. My favorite stage with my daughter was the front stoop with a bottle of nail polish. We would sit shoulder to shoulder, bent over our knees, painting our toenails, and we would talk about the things that are difficult for kids to talk about. And I would raise the points that I knew that she was going to be having trouble with. Of course, I was a high school teacher, so I knew what she was going to be running into, and also when she was doing middle school. So I had a little bit of an advantage, but you could take advantage of this. And it doesn't have to be nail polish. It can be cooking something together, or painting a room together, or exercising together, or doing a family garden together. Just something where you're shoulder to shoulder and they're not watching the expressions on your face, and they're just hearing the words and they're feeling relaxed in the situation. That's when you hold the conversations and you set it up purposefully. So start with the easy what if discussions, because these are on your kids' minds anyway. What if school is hybrid again next year? What if school is distance learning next year? What if school switches up in the middle of the year? What if the way your teacher teaches doesn't work for you? What if the teacher wants you to do group projects? These are things that make your kids uncomfortable. So by asking them these questions, they will start to explore these as they see it. Now, the key to these discussions is that you don't jump in with advice. You don't tell them how it was for you. You don't sit there and judge what they're saying and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. What do? You listen. You let them talk. You say non-committal things like, interesting. I hear what you're saying. I get it. And then let them explore their feelings. It will give you great insight as to what's going on with them. And you'll lose that insight if you jump in there and start talking about you and your experiences. Plus, the fact that you listened and you didn't judge them will make them feel valued and listened to. And when there is a difficult conversation that they need to have with you, they'll feel more confident about coming to you because they already know you listen. Now, there's certain things that you don't negotiate with them. You don't have you can allow them to talk about it, but you don't change your mind on it. And I call these the non-negotiables. That's anything to do with their education, their health, or their safety. They have unformed brains. The cosmic joke is the last part of the brain to form is the frontal lobe, which is the logic and reasoning part of the brain. So that means they're not prepared to do logic and reasoning, but they're very prepared to do emotional. That means you have to be in charge of the education, the health, and the safety. They cannot see the big picture. And this is not done until they're like 26 years old, which is post-college, and that's when the frontal lobe is fully formed, 26, late 20s. So in health, anything that boosts their immune system, that's up to you. That includes their nutrition, that includes their sleep, that also includes their screen time, because electronics give off EMFs, and they are known to be sleep disruptors. So if they're going to keep things in their room, the phone needs to be on do not disturb, airplane mode, or shut off. And so does all their computers and things like that are in the room. It interferes with their sleep and therefore their health. So all those things either need to be taken out of the room while they're charging overnight, or they need to be shut off during the night. In their education, you can talk to them about the amount of time they're putting in on their homework and help them with their study schedules in terms of letting them have some input, but you are the one who decides whether or not they're successfully achieving their goals based on the time that's being allotted. And then safety and driving and parties, if you have sophomores, then driving is going to be on the table this year. So you need to be thinking about this ahead of time about how you're going to handle those talks. In terms of parties, I'm a strict no parties person because this is the way I look at it. You're going to say to your kid, all right, you can go to this party, but even though there'll be alcohol there, you can't drink. And even though there'll be pot there, you can't smoke or get high. And even though there'll be somebody there you have a crush on, you can't hook up. And go and have a good time being the only straight person in the whole place. Now, what sense does that make? Go in there in the midst of all those unformed logic and reasoning centers and make good decisions, have a good time. So that's why I don't approve of parties. But that doesn't mean they don't interact with the opposite sex. All you have to do is set up a situation where they can do that safely. Bowling, trips to carnivals or fairs, roller skating, anything that allows them to be with people and interact with people and you don't have these other worries. Now, maybe you've got a strained relationship and you want to start these conversations, but when you approach your child, you get some snarling. So I recommend using the side door. I call this the casual side door method. First thing you do is you pick something to talk about, something having nothing to do with any kind of rule or discipline or anything like that. Something from your memories or a book or a magazine. And once you pick the thing that you want to share with them, Then you approach your child and you say, I have something I want to share with you. And I want to know if you got 10 minutes now, or would it be better to do it after dinner? So you give them 2 time choices. You don't say, can I talk to you about this? Because that's a yes or no question. Don't do that. Give them 2 time choices that you are good with, and then let them pick one. But be prepared in case they say now. So you share the thing that you found, the oddity or the interesting thing, and then you use their reaction for the direction of the question that you're going to ask them. And then you ask a casual question. So how do you think your best friend would react to this thing? How do you think the character in a movie like Thor or the Black Widow, how do you think they would react in this situation? What do you think the kids in your grade would feel about this? And then you listen. You listen, you say, huh, and then you leave. You go back to what you were doing. You make the whole thing casual and quick. You come into their life, you have a nice, positive, short interaction with them, and you leave. And they're bobbing around in the wake of your positive interaction. And the more times you do this, the more relaxed they'll be when you approach them. So when it's time for you to set the stage to have one of those talks with them outside, or wherever you're going to do, the nail polish or the cooking inside, then they're more receptive because they have more trust in you and your process. So here's a topic you can try if you don't want to spend the time right now creating an idea for yourself. Recognizing facial expressions. So they did a study a couple of decades ago where they showed people different facial expressions and had them name them. So I'm going to show you the picture that they actually used, and I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to identify the emotions yourself. So here it is. Okay, I'm going to start up again in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here are the answers. Just throw in the chat there whether or not you got them right. Because it turns out that most adults get these things right. Most adults recognize facial expressions. Of course, if I put a mask on any one of these, then you wouldn't know what's going on, but we're not going to go there right now. The point is, teens get this wrong 50% of the time. They cannot interpret facial expressions correctly, which obviously is the reason why we have so much conflict in the classroom, because they notice somebody staring into space over there and just assume that that expression on the face is directed at them, and creates all kinds of teen drama. It also explains why they suddenly blow up at you when you're not doing anything. It's because they're looking at an expression on your face that makes them think that you're upset with them, and they're reacting for whatever reason they think you should be upset at. So turns out, if you have this conversation with your kids, they will pause before they react when they see someone's face or their expression, because now they're aware that, well, I may not be seeing that right. But anyway, if you're looking for something odd to bring up with your kids that will be a great conversation starter, there you go. All righty, my next topic is about looking back on last year, the old, if I knew then what I know now. If you have freshmen, then what you're doing is revisiting the 8th grade. Now, don't talk about grades. The conversation is about how it felt. Did you feel successful? Is there something that you would change? What are the things that were going on that you definitely want to keep for next year? Those are the conversations you're going to be having after you do the what if conversations, or interspersed with the what if conversations. These are the conversations to have so that they will be looking at what's going to happen next year. So if there are things that made them feel badly, get those out in the open so you can deal with them and give them solutions for them before the 9th grade starts. And report cards. the question isn't about the grades. The conversation isn't about the grades. The conversation is about, how did you feel about the report card? What would you like to change? What do you want to keep? How do you want to improve things? And how do you want to feel at the end of next year? And then there's the question about standardized testing. Personally, I'm not a fan of standardized testing because it doesn't actually measure anything, but it is a reality in our educational system. And it creates a huge amount of stress for a whole week in most schools. So if your kids were going through the standardized testing last year, then say to them, did you feel prepared? Did you feel rested? Do you think breakfast is a good idea or not a good idea? Because did you feel sleepy during the test? Those are the kinds of conversations to have, not did you do good? Did you get an A? Did you pass? Those aren't what you want to address. You want to find out about how they felt, and you want to listen to what they tell you so you will learn. For sophomores, you're going to revisit report cards and standardized testing the same way. But you also have the added bonus of final exams. They spent the last week of school stressing. That's how they finished school up last year. And that's how they're going to finish school up this year. So you want to have the conversations with them, like, how was your first exam compared to your last exam in terms of your energy? Did you feel the same kind of alertness? Do you think you had enough time for studying for the last exam? Did you study during exam week? And do you want to do that again this year? Or would you like to do your studying the week before so you're more rested during exam week? Find out what they did. Ask them how their friends did in it and how stressed their friends were. And ask them, how can you reduce the stress of final exams now that you've already gone through it? How can we do it better this year? So hold those conversations. So talk about time management, bullying and meanness, their health and rest and nutrition, how much extracurricular activities they had, dating and crushes. And about extracurricular activities, there was a weird thing that happened last year that people's anxiety went down because they couldn't go out and do all these different extracurricular activities. There was a calmness that filled the families' lives because they took stuff off their plate. And we're going to be discussing that later, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So now let's look at the coming year, because I told you all that so we could talk about this. If you're going to start a conversation, talk about the things that are going to make them orient for next year. How do you want to feel when next summer starts? They're in the middle of summer right now. They remember how they felt just now. So say, how do you want to feel this time next year? And what can we do to get ready for next year? What do you hope next year will be like? Which class might give you some trouble? Because if we know, we can address it ahead of time. These are generic, non-judgment questions that allow you to gain insight to your child and give you things to look up so that you can support them later. The most difficult conversation is about the rules for the coming school year. I recommend that you keep the same rules, the same curfew as you had last year. And this is why, especially for freshmen who are starting in a new school. If you are going to have, and this goes for sophomores too, new classroom, new teachers, new classmates, new subjects, academic subjects, new obligations, your whole life is going to be starting brand new. If you throw new rules in there because you've been looking at your child and saying, wow, my child has gotten so mature and has grown so much, I'm going to reward them by giving them some leeway in some of the household rules. This is the wrong time to do it because everything next year is going to be new. So you keep the stuff within your home the same. And when do you change things? You keep the negotiables the same until the first report card. Once you get the first report card and you see that in this new world, the kids are doing well, then you can say, I'm going to talk to you about giving you a little bit more leeway, maybe a later bedtime or stay out later, whatever you want to say, but not until you know that got a handle on the new school year. Now, for going to the next year, walk the halls before school starts. This is an absolute must for freshmen. For sophomores, it's a very strong suggestion, even if they were in that school the year before. Everybody needs to know where the office is, and they need to know how to find the guidance counselors. They need to know where the gym and the locker rooms are. Also, all the entrances and exits of the building, and they need to know where they empty out to, because if they are going out a stairwell that takes them to the opposite side of the building, they need to know how to get to the front of the building again. They need to know where the math department is and where the science labs are and where the different subjects are taught within the school. And everybody, even though they don't want to use them, needs to know where the bathrooms are. If you can, I mean, it may be too early to get this information, but if you can, locate their locker and practice the combination so they're not sitting there feeling like a dweeb when they can't get their locker open in front of the other kids. And if you can't get that information before school starts, then locate the bank where the freshman lockers are or where the sophomore lockers are, so they'll at least have an idea where they're going. And if you happen to be relocating this year, these are the things that you need to look at, especially the graduation requirements, because different towns, different states all have different requirements, and you want to make sure nothing slips through the cracks in this transition. You want to get the summer reading list so that you can shore up their reading. And then you can look at last year's curriculum and compare it to what you guys did. And you can look at this year's curriculum so you can see what's coming down the pike, which you're going to see these three things and many things that I say. Okay, now we've talked about going back to school, and now we're going to talk about going back to school right. I suggest that you do a family calendar. If you are in business, you have something where you keep track of your time. And this is a great habit to model for your kids because it helps them with their organization. So you can do a wall calendar where everybody enters their schedules in there, or you can do your own calendar and then they have their student planner, which they need to show you a couple of times a week so you can make sure they're keeping up with it. Or you can do an online group calendar where you color code everybody so you can see what's going on for each individual in the family. And these are the things you need to put on those. You get the student handbook and you find the calendar. I'm sure they're online by now for next year. And you put in the school holidays and the in-service days and the half days that are part of the school schedule because they affect you. You have to pick them up or find sitters or make sure your presence is covered at work. Also, if they're going to play sports, you need to put in all the games and all the practices. And any clubs that they want to join, then you have to account for when they meet and any activities that they hold. Which brings me to the plenty of time myth. I'm about to freak you out a little bit, so take a deep breath. We all think we have plenty of time to fit it all in. And you can blame the media on that because they all make it look like everybody's fitting it in except you. So we have a finite plate of time and we load up all these things onto our plate and we get it full and balanced. We say, okay, I'm good to go. And then something changes, like the washing machine dies. So now you have to research a new washing machine. You have to buy the new washing machine. You have to be there when the person comes in and installs it and gets the other one out. And you have to figure out what to do with the laundry until that gets settled. So what do? Do we take something out of our plate and say, here, I'll put this washing machine issue in there? No, we cram the washing machine issue in there and everything starts to get unbalanced and you have to make sure it doesn't fall off your plate. And then one of the kids gets sick. So now, instead of saying, I'm going to step away from this and take care of my kid, you say, okay, now I'm going to take care of the kid and make chicken soup and all this other stuff. And we create this concept that we're modeling for our kids that you just keep adding on more. And this weird thing that happened with 2020 was people were forced to take stuff off of their plate. And they now had plenty of time for everything because they had less things there. So when you're planning this year for your child and for yourself, do you really want to cram your plate full again? I mean, let's look at your school stuff. I recommend everybody do 2-week check-ins. And this is in keeping with some stuff that Elisabeth was referring to before. If you're telling your kids that you're doing 2-week check-ins with their teachers, then you don't have to worry about them thinking like you're going behind their back. Plus, 2 weeks is a small enough chunk of time that if your child starts to let things slide, it can be repaired and without messing up their grade. Then this 2-week period gives them time to fail, because in middle school, it's a good time for them to try failing, but it doesn't matter because the college people aren't looking at that. But in high school, you kind of get some free leeway for the freshman year, but they're still looking at their grades for college entrance and stuff like that. So letting your kids know you're going to do 2-week check-ins will let them know that mom's going to be checking up on me or dad's going to be checking up on me. So I can't let this slide. Plus, it gives them a good card to play when they're being pressured by the other kids. I can't. My mom's going to contact the teachers in 2 weeks and I have to make sure I take care of this. I told my daughter to play the mom card anytime she wanted. Now, you also have exams coming up, and depending on your school and your child, they may be doing AP exams in May or final exams in June, but they also, some schools do mid-year exams in December. So put those on your calendar. You need to schedule these things. And you also need to schedule the study time. And I vote for minimally the week before the exams, optimally the month before. And that means that they start with 15 minutes a night reviewing their notebooks. That's all you do for a whole month before. So that week before exams, they're familiar with everything that came from the beginning of the year. Plus, on top of that, you've got school sports and the games and practices for both of those, not to mention the exhaustion that they have when they're getting back into shape in the beginning of the season. And you've got volunteer work that many schools require as part of the graduation requirements. Driver's ed for your sophomores and for your juniors. And kids are going to participate in plays, recitals, and concerts, whether they are doing them themselves or they being there as audience for their friends. So that's a lot of school stuff. And all of that is with homework and projects. But it isn't just school stuff that you're trying to organize. It's family stuff. First and foremost, you need to have weekly family time and schedule your family vacations and emphasize the importance of downtime and relaxation for everybody in your household. So now you got your school stuff, you got your family stuff. Let's talk about the other stuff. Your kids are going to want to hang out with friends. That's a given. And that is a time consumer. And if they play any kind of league sports like Little League or AAU, there's practice and games for that. They may want to have an after school job like mowing lawns or babysitting. And don't forget time for worship. Clubs and hobbies that your kids want to do on their own, not things that they are signed up for. That they are all time consumers. So when you are organizing a schedule for your kids and you want things to be calmer in your family's life, then keep this in mind and allow for these things. Oh, and don't forget your health and hygiene, the thing that we always leave for last. So quickly, I'm almost done here. Before summer's over, here are some things you can do. First thing I would do is take the learning styles inventory. And if you send me an email at info@deborahanndavis.com, I will send this to you. The learning styles inventory helps you understand how your child learns best and the things that are weak so that you can help them get stronger in those areas. Plus, your teachers have a teaching style that matches their learning style because that's what makes sense to them the way the world is. So if your child has a different learning style than the teacher, they may be having difficulty in that class. And using this tool, the learning styles inventory, you can address those differences and find ways for your child to show their learning what's going on in a way the teacher can receive it. Also use the next couple of weeks for boosting math and reading. Don't worry about science, don't worry about social studies. look at the math class they had last year and find some holes in it and say, this is how we're going to strengthen you for next year. Or look at what's coming up next year and find out what's going to be taught immediately in math and teach it to them now. Find out where they're going to be reading. Have them do a little bit of reading every day in the room with you while you're reading. Check last year's and next year's curriculums to base this on. And like I've said before, all right, I clicked something I shouldn't have. Hang on a second. All right, there we go. What you want to do is search. You don't want to come on strong and say, okay, summer's over. You want to search, find fun ways to teach blah, blah, blah. Math, reading, algebra, geometry, whatever it was, even if it's like a title of a book they were supposed to have read. Fun ways to teach it, and then come up with interesting, fun ways to address these topics that you want to strengthen in your child in the next couple of weeks. Or have them research it and find fun ways for them to learn it, because they'll start poking around and exploring things, especially like math games. Oops, all right, hang on. So that is the end of what I want to discuss. I want to say thank you very much for listening, and Clarissa is up next. If you have any questions or you want to take advantage of my coaching, then contact me via email. And as a person who signed up for this, you will automatically be receiving my monthly newsletter called Merry Meddling, which will give you a lot of information about things that you can deal with your children. And you can also get a free parenting coaching session with me. Just contact me through my website or email me, and you fill out a questionnaire so we don't have to take up our time learning about you. I read the questionnaire, and then you and I sit down for an hour and we sort out things that you want to discuss. So again, thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Any questions that we want to field quickly from anybody joining us? No? All right. Well, then let's go ahead and do a quick 5-minute bio break, as they say, and I've got 10:33. We'll be back about 10:38, 10:39 Mountain Time.
Here we are.
All right.
Set, go.
What's that?
On your mark, get set, go.
That's it. Let's roll.
Woo! Okay. I'm really excited for this because Clarissa has always proven to be such an excellent speaker and so insightful for things that our kids need. So without further ado, let me introduce Clarissa Constantine. She's an only child who had a tough relationship with her mom, as she alluded to earlier. And during college at University of Hartford, which is in my backyard, she began what would turn into decades-long career as a test prep coach. I used a test prep coach for my daughter, and I can highly recommend them. Clarissa has helped thousands of kids around the world navigate college and grad school admissions processes. So when you're listening to her, keep that in mind for your kids as they're getting older. She's joked that along the way, she sometimes finds herself playing the role of therapist more than tutor, because she helps kids manage the stresses of life. And any way you can get kids to manage their stress is a blessing. But no matter how many young adults she has helped, she's always longed for a closer, more intimate relationship with her own mother. Unfortunately, her mom passed away in November of 2019. So Clarissa is now driven to help other families avoid the heartache, the lost years, and the regret that she, and most likely her mom too, experienced. In addition to test prep coaching and dreaming of the way the parent-teen-tween connection can help families, she's also a certified life coach who helps teens learn concepts like goal setting, self-compassion, self-esteem, mindfulness, and growth mindsets. Today, Clarissa is going to be discussing how your juniors and seniors can rock the back to school process, as well as your college-bound grads. So give it up for Clarissa.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. So yeah, I keep that information in the introduction because although I don't have kids of my own, I've absolutely had people say to me, well, you're not a parent. What the heck do you know about raising children? And quite frankly, I don't know a damn thing about raising children of my own. What I can tell you is that in my experience, not only as the teenager, but also now as a member of the village, as it were, in supporting families with teenagers, I have an interesting perspective because I have a certain remove. I don't have that intimate airport full of baggage that some people refer to in their own relationships with their own kids. And sometimes I can come at it from a perspective of like Elisabeth was saying earlier, well, let's think about it a different way. And let's not just automatically jump to the conclusions based on the behaviors that we've established, because it takes two to tango. And so we show up in our relationships one way, and we expect the others to keep the other in our relationship, whether it's our partners, whether it's the kids in our worlds, whatever, we expect them to keep showing up in the same way. And when we can step out of that, then that's where we can impact change. So I am a firm believer that I forgot this is in there. We'll come back to that. As we look through this process of helping our older high school and to whatever extent college is on the table for kids, navigate this process, I am a firm believer that the most important role that the adults in these kids' worlds can play is mentor, manager, not doer, not nagger, not what do you mean you didn't get that assignment in? And so this actually goes back to like what Elisabeth was talking about early on, is like, you know what? If your kids are going to fail, like you're not going to be there to save them every single time. The sooner that you can give them the experience of learning to fix their own difficulties, the better. But really what's important is that we're modeling for them how to do that. So I really invite you to consider that as we navigate this late high school into whatever the next step is, for many it's college, the most important aspect that we want to stay focused on is our relationship to our kids. yes, college is an important piece for a lot of families. That is the expectation. And I totally get that we're coming at that from the perspective that our social association or our social culture is that college is the best way to get to a place where you can afford to live independently and have a comfortable, happy life financially. And I'm not going to say that finances don't matter. I'm not going to argue that college is largely a very effective way of getting to a comfortable livelihood. I am going to say, however, that if you make that the priority and you sacrifice your relationship with the kids in the long run, that's going to bring about potentially even bigger challenges. So I just wanted to kind of frame that as we go into this to say, like, I'm not saying that college and higher education and next steps aren't important, but navigating that with as intact of a relationship as we can with our teenagers as possible is going to be more important. So going back to school, well, life, quote unquote, after the pandemic, are we actually there yet? Well, we might argue not so much. I know before we had our guests join us today, Deborah, Elisabeth, and I were chatting about traveling and visiting family. And well, if I take this step to see this person in my family and we don't do this and we don't do that and we don't do the other thing, we should be safe. The reality is we're not past the pandemic yet. So the questions that Deborah was mentioning earlier, what if we go back to virtual school? What if things switch up? What if? We need to keep in mind, we're not on the other side of this yet. We are trying to get back to some sense of new normal, which frankly, if I never hear the words new normal or pivot again in my life, I will be perfectly thrilled. But the reality is we're not there yet. So what we have to keep in mind is that as excited as the adults in your world are likely to be about your kids going back to quote unquote real school, if that's happening in your geography, it is likely that we've got some apprehension on the parts of our kids. That, I mean, going back to school is nerve-wracking in the first place. Going back, quote unquote, sort of, kind of, not really post-pandemic is likely to be even more anxiety inducing. If you are in a family where you have family members who are immunocompromised and you have had to take extraordinary measures to protect your family, if you, God forbid, have lost a family member to COVID, or whatever the case is, if there is still this awareness for them that we need to be careful, but they still are so excited to go back and be with their friends. One of the most important things we need to do along this path is just keep open conversations. So we're going to come back to that in a second. If you're a family, however, where maybe you haven't had to take or haven't been able to take those same kinds of precautions, maybe you have a family you've got first responders in your family, or maybe your family is just super healthy and you haven't been overly concerned about it. One of the things I do want you to consider is, how are your kids impacted by the energy of folks around them? I hadn't even considered this until last week. One of my networking organizations went back to in-person meetings for the first time last week. We've been virtual for 1.5 years at this point. I'm an introvert. I like this. I've been teaching online for 11 years. So shifting to an online world, I was like, please come to the dark side, come to my world. I've loved it. I haven't had to commute anywhere. And then all of a sudden, I had to go back in person with 40 other people in a room who were all talking at way higher volumes than I've become accustomed to. And I was literally sitting in my chair, kind of feeling like this, like, oh crap, like the energy around me. And again, I'm an introvert. I'm very empathic. I am very sensitive to the energies around me. I literally had to almost run from the room at the end by the time I got done with it. So if you have a kiddo who is like that, who you know doesn't do well with loud volume, doesn't do well with a lot of hubbub around them, this is going to bring up other stuff for them. So we're going to talk about some of that, but be aware that it's not just the normal going back to school. It's all this other stuff that goes into it as well. And certainly this is not only applicable for our rising juniors and seniors, but certainly also with our younger kids as well, especially the middle schoolers who don't necessarily know that they're introverts or extroverts or how they're impacted by energy around them or anything. But one of the most important things I want you to remember is this. You will find I'm a huge Maya Angelou fan. Like if I could, sit down and have dinner with any amazing human being, dead or alive, it would be Maya Angelou. And I would just want to do the Vulcan mind meld to take everything that she knew and dump it in my head. We talk about this a lot in education, in sales, and I think sometimes we forget about it when we're dealing with those who are closest to us. And part of the reason that I bring this up is we said I had a less than fantastic relationship with my mom. The feeling that I had with my mom that I was never good enough. Nothing I ever did was enough. I graduated 7th in my class in high school. And you know what my mom said to me? Well, that's good, but why weren't you first? Now, I know that came from a space of her belief that I could do anything that I wanted. But the way I received it was that I wasn't good enough. And that was just an example of why I believe that our relationships with the teens in our worlds, the relationship is so much more important. So one of the most important things I invite you to do with your students across the board is to keep the dialogue open. Now, Cindy, you had said earlier that with some families that you engage with, they're like, well, but how do I say that? Right? How do I ask that question? So it's easy for me to say, just ask, which I'm going to do in a second, but I want to give you a couple of actual tactile, tangible strategies. Number one, journaling, keeping a joint journal. You write something to the teen, go tuck it under their pillow. Let them process. Don't talk about it. Don't ask about it. Just let the written word be a means of communication. The Open the Door journal is actually a journal that I created that is available for purchase and download from my website. And you can then take it to Office Depot or your local print shop and have it printed. But it's set up so that there are questions, many of them paired, where it's like, what's your favorite childhood memory? And so the parent can write about their favorite, or the parent or the adult can write about their favorite childhood memory. And then the teenager can write about their favorite childhood memory. Some of them are simple questions like that. Some of them are a little bit more probing, like, is there something that you'd like to talk to me about that you don't know how to approach with me? So it gives them just another manner of doing that. I'm also a huge fan of this card deck, the Say It With Gratitude deck. A friend of mine actually created that. And I use it at the beginning of all of my classes just to set the tone. Studies have shown that gratitude, a daily gratitude practice, absolutely changes your mental the wiring in your brain. And so if we can start every day with a gratitude question, or end every day with a gratitude question, that as a family can make a big impact. So those are less invasive, less direct, less pointed ways, to Deborah's point of hey, here's a simple study. Let's talk about this. If you make a habit of opening these conversations with less challenging questions, then it makes the more challenging questions easier to deal with. But here's the deal. If you think your kids aren't talking about sex, drugs, suicide, mental health, you name it, you're wrong. They are talking about it, and they are talking about it way earlier than we realize. So if you want to have a piece of the conversation and have that conversation be comfortable for your kids to come to you about, we as the adults have to take the first step in doing that, because they're not going to come to you and be like, hey, mom, my boyfriend tried to pressure me into having sex last night. They're not going to do it unless you've had a foundation of conversation. And I've had teen suicide is something that hits very close to home for me. And I've had parents ask me, well, how do I ask my kids about these topics? And literally it's just ask, but you need to find your words. So I encourage you to make notes to yourself, journal about this, write it down. Things like, how do you feel like you're handling return to school? Deborah had some great questions earlier. What do you think about finding a life coach? Or do you think that talking to somebody like a coach or a therapist, somebody completely outside of the family who is just yours to talk to, would that be helpful? Have you ever talked to your boyfriend or girlfriend about first base, second base, third base? And to Deborah's point, this is not an opportunity for you to put your interjections and your opinions in. This is giving them the space to talk to you. Have you heard any of your friends talk about hurting themselves or hurting others? And then to Elisabeth's point, shush and wait and let them process and do it in a non-face-to-face fashion. I love the nail polish on the front porch. I love going hiking. I love going for a drive. Maybe you make it a plan with your kiddos that, with each of your kids, once every other week, we're going to get in the car on a Saturday morning and we're just going to go for a drive, or we're going to go get donuts, or we're going to go whatever, but that's your time with that kiddo. Have you ever thought of hurting yourself or others? If you're not asking, I promise you, they're just not going to come and volunteer this information. I cannot emphasize this enough. Listen, okay? This is something that as I look back on my relationship with my mom, the way that I ultimately can summarize our relationship, and I own my part in this as an adult, but I didn't know any differently when I was a kid. We were both so emphatic. Let me back up. I never questioned that she loved me. I never questioned that she wanted what was best for me. It was simply a disconnect that what she believed was best for me and what I believed what was best for me didn't always match. And we ended up spending so much time trying to prove to each other that we were right, that somewhere along the line, the ability to be kind fell off the table as an option. And like I said, I'll own that. But I never felt like my mom was the safe place that I could go to talk about these types of things. And I really would have liked that. And it was all about grades for me. And so again, I invite you to ask questions and listen. One of the best questions that you can ask is when your kids actually do open up to you, or when they come home and they're frustrated, ask them, do you need an ear or do you need an answer? Do you need an ear or do you need an answer? Because I'm a believer, like I said, I'm an empath, I'm a life coach. I believe that we each have the answers within us, but sometimes we need somebody else literally as a sounding board. Just to what does a board do? You throw the ball at it, it bounces back. You throw the ball back at it, it bounces back. So ways that you can, or phrases that you can use to continue the conversation or to keep the kids digging within themselves. Tell me more. Or, oh, really? That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. Or, do you mean to say, and then summarize your understanding? Or, am I understanding this correctly? And summarize it. Or, okay, hang on a second. Let me make sure that I'm understanding what you're trying to say. Because sometimes it takes them 2 or 3 or 4 times. It takes us 2 or 3 or 4 times to actually say it the way that we mean it. And by modeling this process, it's giving them the opportunity. I mean, our first drafts are never good or are never great. They're never the finished product. That's why we write, we rewrite and we edit, but we don't do that with our verbs or with our verbalization rather. So the more that we model and we give them the space to do that, the better they will become at actually pausing and thinking their thoughts through and articulating what they really mean the first time out of the gate. Or maybe the second or third instead of the 5th or the 6th. So ask the question. I love Deborah's idea of, hey, I've got a question for you. I'd like about 10 minutes of your time. When can you give me that time? Can you give it to me now? Do you need a brain break right now? Or I'm going to be flexible after dinner between 6 and 7. Would that work better for you? And that way you're inviting them to gift you their time. And it's showing a respect of their time, just like you expected them to respect yours. So all of this is just what I would like to offer as life advice for teenagers and helping to keep those relationships intact. That has to happen year round. But I think it's incredibly important now as we're talking about back to school. Deborah mentioned this earlier in terms of asking your kids, well, what if things don't go from, like, what if we're not in person all year long? What if we do have to revert to online? Having a conversation with them about what their expectations are about how this school year is going to go gives you a little bit of an insight into their brain. What do you think your favorite subject is going to be this year? What class are you looking forward to the most? Which teacher do you anticipate? Because keep in mind, junior, senior year, presuming they've been in the same school for 4 years, they know, like, they've heard about the personalities of the teachers. They know whether Mrs. Stitt is a witch or whether Mrs. Davis is the hardest science teacher in the building, right? So who do you expect is going to be the biggest challenge? Ask them what they expect to go well and what they expect might be more challenging. And then brainstorm other outcomes. What if it turns out that Mrs. Stitt actually isn't as overbearing as other people have thought that she might be? What if it turns out, or how do you expect that you could approach Mrs. Davis most effectively if you've heard these horrid things? Not that you would have, I'm sure, but like, what if, right? And ask them, well, what do you think the lunchroom is going to be like? Do you think kids are actually going to be social distancing? What's your plan about social distancing? And remember, ask them and then let their answers be okay, whatever they are, just let them out. One of the biggest challenges we've all faced in this last year and a half has been this concept of, like, we're not in control, folks. There is this little microbe thing that we can't even see that has taken over control of our lives. And it is terrifying, particularly because we can't even see it, right? And so if we as adults with fully formed brains, as Deborah mentioned, if we're feeling out of control, your kids are feeling out of control. So as we're navigating these conversations about expectations, what do you think it's going to be like in, walking the halls? What's the lunchroom going to look like? Are kids going to be allowed off campus for lunch? And then asking them, what aspects of this can we maintain control in? At the end of the day, really, truly, the only thing we can control is our own response to the situation. So empowering our kids to think ahead about, like, well, you can choose how to respond relative to social distancing in the classroom or in the lunchroom. How can you proactively approach that? If it's a place where we've got good weather, could you say to your friends before lunch even happens, hey, let's do a picnic outside, so that you're proposing it and you're maintaining control and able to do something proactive that gives you a sense of still doing what you believe is right? And walking through those what if situations, and how can you drive that ship? My tagline for my business is empowering parents and empowering teens. If we can empower the teens to have these forward-thinking thoughts, then they can retain more of that sense of control that they feel like they've lost. So I also really like to think about goals. First conversation I have with my test prep students. Where are you now? What colleges or grad schools are you looking at? And what grades or what test scores do you need to get there? And certainly grades are an easy place to make goals, to set goals. Do you want to be first in your class? Do you want straight A's? Do you want a 3.0? But I really invite you to consider goals beyond that. What kind of physical fitness or wellness goals do your kids have? If your students aren't athletes, especially, if they are athletes, they're already getting some kind of physical activity. But if they're not, like I was the band geek. Exercise was a 4-letter word in my household. I really, looking back at it, would have loved some kind of family activity. And so helping the kiddos set their goals, but also as a family, discussing what you would like to do as a family. When do you want to travel? Where do you want to travel now that things are opening up? What kinds of other activities can we do together? Can we go volunteer once a month? What kinds of volunteer activities are we each interested in? Do we want to go do a beach cleanup? Do we want to go pack food for the homeless? Are LGBTQ conversations important to us? Can we go to a soup kitchen that offers free food to members of the LGBTQ community? All those kinds of things. Kiddos, do they want cars? Deborah was saying at 10th grade, that's, most states 15 is when we start to allow drivers permits. If the kiddos want to purchase their own car or save to go on a trip after graduation, what kind of financial goals are we setting? So when it comes to goals, you may know this acronym, a SMART goal. This is just an acronym to help us define goals that we can work toward. You want to be specific. I want to earn $5,000 to put toward a car. So they're specific, they're measurable. What kind of car do I want? Do I want a Ford Mustang? Do I want a Chevy Camaro? Whatever, will mom and dad let me have a Mustang or a Camaro? Make sure they're attainable. If your kid says, I want to earn $100,000 as a junior, I hope they already have a business going, like a YouTube channel and a lot of subscribers. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm saying $100,000, if you haven't started, may not be attainable this school year, if that's the time frame we're working within. So attainable and realistic. And again, I encourage you to do this as a family unit. We want to take 4 camping trips between now and December. So let's set the days or the weekends aside so that we can do that. If you're in a situation where maybe your kiddo is an athlete and you would like to get more activity, maybe you can actually enlist your kiddo's support and be like, hey, will you help hold me accountable to getting up and going for a run every morning? Again, that's empowering them to put them in the leadership role. So speaking about accountability, again, going back to the points that we can't do this for them. If we're talking about juniors and seniors, my friends, they're theoretically going to be on their own in 2 years. If we have not yet, and we choose not to currently start modeling for them how to structure accountability, college, presuming that's where they go next, is going to present some significant challenges for them. So when it comes to accountability, I love Deborah's idea of, hey, I'm going to check in with your teachers every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every month. But here's the thing, as the adult in the household, you got to do it. If you fall off once, that accountability disappears. So even if it's a case of you need to go into your email and you need to auto set an email to go to each of your kids' teachers every 2 weeks. Hey, Mrs. Stitt, this is, Clarissa checking in. I just want to see how Bobby Sue is doing. Can you let me know if there's anything I need to know about? Set it to go every 2 weeks. That way we know it's not on us necessarily even to remember, like use technology to your advantage. Okay. But then also have the conversation with your kiddos about how and how frequently you're going to check in with them personally. I can guarantee you, if you are breathing down their neck every day, they're going to hate it and you are going to feel like a witch. You're not going to love it. But I think it could be reasonable to say, hey, I want to set Sunday from 6 to 6:30 aside to check in with you. I want to check your grades online with you. If you have an online, like I know here in Colorado, we have Naviance. That's a pretty common system. I want to check in. I want to make sure that I want you to check in. What assignments are missing? What big assignments have been offered to you that are 3 weeks away? That's one of the big things that changes, especially later in high school, is that it's not just here's the homework for tonight. It's you have a big project due in 3 weeks. And some teachers help kids break it down. Some teachers have like mini deadlines along the way to help them learn this process, but not every teacher does. So supporting your kiddos in that big picture can be helpful. As you do this check-in, other questions you can ask. What feels overwhelming right now? What kind of help do you need? Or what kind of help do you see that your friends need? Because if they may not want to identify that they need the help, but they may be able to identify that their friends need the help. But that's kind of like almost a subversive way of identifying that they need it. Or if you could wave a magic wand that magically gave you the solution, what would the solution be? And really remember, you're the manager here. You're teaching them how to do these, how to incorporate these skills into their lives. So when it comes to task management and time management, Deborah already mentioned having a family calendar, which I'm a big fan of, because that way, especially if you have multiple kids, it really gives them a visual about the world does not revolve around them. How many parents I've had over the years say to me, my kid told me last night that he needed me to do XYZ for tomorrow, or needed me to drive him for XYZ. Now, if your kids are driving at this point, this makes it a little bit easier because you can be like, good luck, go figure it out. Like, you've got a car, drive yourself. But when it comes to those longer types of projects, encouraging them, as Elisabeth was saying earlier, spend 15 minutes a day. Or I think maybe it was Deborah. I'm getting confused. You guys gave good complimentary info. 15 minutes a day on a particular task that maybe it isn't due until Friday. One of the things that I always struggled with, and to be fair, as a business owner, I still struggle with, is estimating how long a project is going to take me. And I'm like, I've always been like, great, I can set aside 2 hours, but what if I don't finish in those 2 hours? Well, the key is setting aside those 2 hours early enough that if I do need more time, I have space to fill it in. That is a skill. We are not magically born knowing how to do that, clearly, because I still struggle with it. So giving them tools to say, hey, let's spend 15 minutes a day on each content area. And if you need more than that, then we still have room before the end of the week to fit that in. Or if you're scheduling 30 minutes a day and it turns out you only need 15, then you have 15 extra minutes to go play Minecraft or watch YouTube or have some downtime or whatever. And again, these are kinds of skills that you can start coaching your kids on younger. But man, if they don't have it by junior year, we really need to incorporate these things so that they have it when they get to college. It's really important along the way to make sure that you're praising the process, not just the end result. Like Deborah said, grades are a snapshot of here's where you are so far. Grades only tell one part of the story. And if you can look at your kiddo and go, wow, you brought your grade up from a 50% to a 75%, that is a huge gain in a short time frame. I'm really proud of the work and the effort that you put in. That not only gives them the sense of that they're good enough, but that is a key component of engendering a growth mindset in your students. If the only thing that ever gets praised is the end result, that will absolutely result in a fixed mindset. You will end up with kids who don't want to try if they don't think that they can do anything less than perfection, and they will get stuck and they will end up unhappy. So praising the process is key. If these are aspects that you don't feel overly well equipped to mentor your kids in, like I would not be overly equipped, there are folks who specialize in coaching teenagers. Certainly there are academic tutors, right? Deborah is one of them. We absolutely have academic tutors. We have life coaches. We also have folks who specialize in executive functioning to help them develop these specific kinds of skills. Now, these skills aren't only important on their individual assignments, but they're also really important with group assignments. And this, I mean, in the real world, we work in groups often. Elisabeth, Deborah, and I, we each own our own businesses, but we're working as a group here. So part of what we did was we set aside goals. What do we want to achieve? How frequently do we want to do these workshops? And when we meet to collaborate, what are the goals of those sessions and how long are we allocating to it? I'm in a competitive singing quartet. I do this because that's the role that I fill in my quartet. I'm responsible for setting up our rehearsal times. So we had an extra rehearsal on Wednesday, and it literally was 6:30 to 6:45 was our warm-up time. 6:45 to 7:15, we were working on this song. 7:15 to 7:30, we were working on this next piece. And so coaching your kids in group assignments of like how to manage this, how to help them set goals and set time allocations, it will help minimize, I can't promise that it will alleviate entirely, but it will help minimize the feeling of, I hate group projects because I always end up doing all the work. So, and I mean, certainly group projects get easier when kids have more mobility, but again, this is a skill that we can coach them on earlier, middle school into early high school, helping them say to their group, what are our goals for this time frame? And, how long are we meeting? And then being clear with the rest of their teammates about what each person is going to be doing by the next time that we meet. This goes back to the data that Elisabeth was talking about. It's not just about Mrs. Stitt. Nobody in our class remembers you talking about this. It gives your teens the ability to track, well, on this day, Deborah got things done on time, but Clarissa didn't. Or Clarissa got it done on this time, but Elisabeth had half of her work done, something like that. And if it gives them the ability to track, then they have that information with the entire group that they can then take to the teacher as necessary. And it helps avoid some of the difficulties of group projects that come up. So again, I'm a huge Maya Angelou fan. Going back to praising the process, doing that check-in with your kiddos. I recommend weekly to check in with them. Keep praising the process. Maya Angelou said, do the best that you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. I have my own variation on that. Do what you can until you know differently or different. Then when you know different, do different. Ignore the grammatical issues there. Different and differently don't cooperate nicely. But my attitude is like, hey, what worked? What didn't? How can I adjust? And my issue with the better and best is that brings judgment in. And if there's a better way of doing things and I didn't do it that way, then that's going to tell me that I wasn't good enough. And a lot of kids grow up with that. So the more that we can say, hey, this worked, this didn't, this worked well for you, or this was comfortable, this helped you get to your goal, this didn't. How do we rearrange that? Or how do we revise that is really important. So keeping the communication open with your kiddos, helping them set goals, identifying from the beginning what your accountability check-in timeline is going to look like. And you know what? If they don't get something done, be the referee, as Deborah said. Hey, it didn't get done. What are you going to do to change that? Oh, your teacher knocks off a letter grade for every day that you're late. All right, well, you're already 2 days late, so the best you can get is a C. It is a fact. Leave it as a fact. What are you going to do about it? And you know what? If it takes them 2 more days and it ends up that they get an F on that assignment, then that's where you can circle back to the goals and say, is that activity supporting the goals that you set? And if you bring it back to the goals, it becomes very, I don't want to say businesslike, but businesslike, of like, you either did the job or you didn't. You're not a good person or a bad person. There is no judgment. You either got it done or you didn't, and help them reassess, reframe, get back on the horse and keep going. So if the expectation is that college is the next step for your kiddos, junior year is when things really do start kicking in. So to kind of break this down, things that are consistent, looking and exploring colleges. Certainly grades are a factor, but again, don't make them the only factor. Tests, SAT or ACT, this is an influx conversation because of the pandemic. But to the extent that the SATs and ACTs basically have 2 purposes. Number 1, for admission, which many schools have gone test optional, at least temporarily because of the pandemic. But secondly, scholarships. Now I happen to know the University of California school system is not looking at any of these relative to scholarships at this point because of the pandemic. They're also moving away from SATs and ACTs because they're apparently creating their own new exam. So that hasn't been announced, like what it actually is, but that's coming. Certainly sports. If your student is looking at being recruited, double check with the NCAA guidelines as to when they can start having conversations with coaches, when they can go to camps, those kinds of things. But the sports and the extracurriculars and the fun, those are what make us human. And if we do not learn to prioritize the non-academic aspects of life for our kids, they're going to turn into workaholics who only identify themselves as by what they produce. They won't have beer league hockey like my husband plays. They won't have the chorus and the quartet that I'm in, and their mental health will suffer if they don't have these other fun things going on. The brain needs downtime. The body needs expression. We need creativity. We need these other things in our worlds. Spring of junior year, Deborah and Elisabeth were already chatting about the calendars. AP exams, if your kiddos are taking AP exams, are always the first 2 weeks of May. So when you're trying to look at the calendar and the planning process, if your kiddo is taking a couple or more than a couple AP exams, I strongly recommend that you stay away from the May and June SAT, ACT. Summer after junior year is an ideal time to visit colleges. Now, the college visits, I could do an entire workshop just on college visits. They can get very costly, not just financially, but also time-wise. At the very least, go visit campuses near you. Identify what your kiddos like about the campuses and what they don't like. Summertime before senior year is also a great time to start working on their applications, at least the fundamentals, working on their application essays, and reaching out to teachers for letters of recommendation. Going into senior year, the fall is going to be very busy with college applications. The spring is still a great time to visit colleges because that's also when their college acceptances are going to start coming in. And so it's a great time to go stay a night on campus, see how it feels, see if this is really where you want to be. And then certainly graduation. If you do have any intentions of celebrating and doing a big party, plan early because caterers and canvas tents get booked up and get sold out. So plan ahead. And then certainly the summer going into college, encouraging them to have as much fun as they can and just be kids. It's really the last quote unquote summer that they're going to have, unless they choose to go into education. And even at that, they may not still have summers. Also, other things to consider just that aren't necessarily time bound. Continue teaching your kids about finances, especially if they have a part-time job. Get them saving, get them working with a financial advisor. I talked about this more in our last workshop. Summer community college classes are also a great way to keep kids engaged. They can earn college credit if they so choose, and that can lighten their load when they get to college, if that's the way that they choose to go. And travel. If your kids are like, hey, I may want to take a year off, doing a year in the Peace Corps could be really cool. For some kids, the military is a great fit because they're just not ready to go to college straight away. Volunteering, I've already mentioned, this is something that is big and important for me to do. I try to do as much of this as I can, whether it's I'm donating financially or I'm getting out and being involved in my community. And those are the big pictures that I have for your juniors and seniors that are both time bound and more philosophical. I hope that it helps a bit to, perhaps reconfigure your perspective of the role that you play in the lives of the kiddos in your world. I do have a podcast if you're interested. We just launched it. And Deborah, we still need to chat. I haven't done any new interviews since I launched because life's been a little busy with test prep this summer. But if you'd like more information, certainly I actually have interviewed Elisabeth. We've gotten that in there. She's coming up. Parent Tween University is a parent education platform that I've got. But if you've liked your time with us, we certainly would love to have you join us again. These are some offers that we had from last time. I presume they're still on the table. I didn't confirm, but they're on the recording from last time. So they're still out there. And like I said, if you are interested in joining us for our first quarter check-in, where we're going to take what we've talked about today and build on that to, how do we adjust things for first quarter? Elisabeth, Deborah, and I are going to be back on October 23rd. You can hit that up right at parent-tween-connection.com/events. It's got all the information there. And with that, I'm going to say, hey, what questions do we have, if any?
First of all, let's say thank you, Clarissa. That was a lot of information again. And
Excellent.
really good to kind of know what's the end of the journey look like.
Well, I think the end of the journey is having kids that you can have a relationship with and be friends with once they turn into adults,
Yes.
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 you know, and
The beginning of the journey at
It is
the,
so much fun.
yeah. So anyway, Cindy, Leah, Chloe, questions, thoughts, ideas, takeaways?
I do have one little thing I wanted to add in there. You were talking about group projects, and I had mentioned earlier about learning styles. And the thing is that if you've got a bunch of kids who have different learning styles, they don't know what to do with each other. But if you take the learning style inventory with your kid and then have your kids share that with the other kids, you can identify what their strengths are. So the person who is the visual learner can be the person who does some of your researching, and the person who's a kinesthetic learner can be the one who assembles your project. So you can assign your project jobs based on what the kids' strengths are, and things will go more smoothly, which
Absolutely.
is great on the job training for being an adult.
Absolutely. Cool. Any other thoughts?
It's time for us to wrap up.
Yeah.
Audience, you have been very focused, and you stuck with us to the end. Thank you. We like eat this stuff up for breakfast. Like the three of us could get on a call and like talk about this stuff for hours and hours.
Mhm.
But we really appreciate you hanging in there, and we hope you'll come back in the fall when we're kind of doing that first quarter check-in. And yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We will get this recording out to you. And, definitely feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll have all of our contact information in the email. So if you've got more specific questions for us, feel free to reach out. And we hope we'll see you next time.
Thank you for being here.